I thought really long and hard about what I might call my presentation today, because as an academic of a number of years, I've long since learned that the more apocalyptic you can make the title, the less likely it is your audience is going to fall asleep. So I called the presentation The End of Learning, because I thought it was suitably apocalyptic, but it has that lovely thing that there will be a twist at the end, which we'll get to, so bear that thought in mind. It is the end of learning. For those of you who don't know much about Macquarie, we're out in the northwest of this fair city, and we have about 38,000 students on 130 odd hectares of lovely bushland. It's one of the few campuses around Sydney where you can see kangaroos bounding around. It's a fantastic campus. And up until last week, we were the #1 university under 50 years old in the country. Unfortunately, last week we turned 50, so we can't make that claim anymore. But we're very proud of the university, and we're always been a university which explores new and interesting ways of doing research and delivering learning and teaching. And my job as Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Learning and Teaching and Diversity is to think about what those ways of delivering and designing curriculum, delivering and designing teaching and learning will be over the next 5 to 10 years, which is why I think I was asked here today. This is the Optus Vision office? Right. Just checking, yeah. Okay, so what I just want to do for the next little while is speak to a brief I was given around talking about technology trends in education. But I will give you a little bit of background about myself first. My discipline area of research is media studies, and the most recent publications I've had, in 2007 I wrote a book called The Book is Dead. That apocalyptic title thing comes back. Followed a few years later by a book called Media Convergence, and then later this year there will be a book called Beyond 2.0, The Future of Music. And I guess in each of those books I predicted variously the death of the book, the death of traditional media and the death of the music industry, none of which have come to pass. Which is why the end of learning, well, you can see where the pattern is there. We will not, I assure you, be losing the higher education sector anytime soon. You may be aware of a Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's something that, every HBR article sort of pops up and you sit there in exec meetings and they tell you these things. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. My slight modification to that is culture eats technology for lunch. So we have to be very careful, and in all of the books that I've written, it's really been about that intersection between people's cultures, social ideas, ways of doing things, and the tension between technology, which in the technology sector is often seen as the driver of these things, but from my perspective is often more the enabler. And the enabler results in things that perhaps don't always go the way the technology folk suggest they will, because that little thing, culture, gets in the way. So we need to think about that in the sense of the higher education sector. And as I said, for me, in the sector, as in all of those other research areas which I've been looking at, technology really is only an enabler. In itself, it does not provide solutions. And I've got an example here. We built a new library about 3 years ago. It's been open for about 3 years now. And it sort of happened at the time when we could get all our journals online, where most of the books, etc., were going to be electronic. And the whole thing was kind of like heading towards a digital universe. And in my book, I call it a heavenly library, where you can just sit under a doona and get any book from anywhere in the world delivered to you in 5 seconds flat, and that was all you needed. And so clearly the opportunity existed for a university to go to, in a provocative sense, let's build a digital library. Why do we bother with books anymore? The reality, though, is that there is an embedded culture in academia that loves books. You try and move my colleagues to an open plan space, they will resist because there is nowhere to put their books. So the book, as a cultural artefact, as a technology, if you like, is something that is so deeply embedded in the practice of learning, teaching and research for many of my colleagues, not all, for many of my colleagues, that whatever technology solution we came up with for the library had to understand that. If we built an entirely digital library that existed only in web browsers and mobile devices, it wouldn't have succeeded. So what we came up with is this. So a perfect example, if you like, of an appropriate technology, a blended one that's not like purely driven as a digital storage and digital artifact kind of technology-based solution, but one that responds to a human and cultural dimension. And I'm brave enough to suggest that that's the sort of solutions that we need to be exploring in higher education. And that's the sort of solutions we need to be thinking about, because the human dimension is perhaps the key dimension of learning, and one that we shouldn't forget. So the brief I was given today was to, I think the word was provide some megatrends in technology in education. And very fortuitously, just the week before I got the request, this report was released. It's the New Media Consortium's Horizon project. You can download the report. It's up on the web for free. A panel of experts, of which for some reason I was one, all got together and collaborated via a wiki. 30 or 40 of us wikified our ideas, and we came up with a bunch of recommendations around technology in the education sector. So I thought all I had to do was read the report out to you, and then, presentation done. I'm not quite going to do that. And I will have to say that I don't always agree with all of the recommendations and all of the ideas in the report, because, it was a report written by committee, so it looks a little bit like a camel. But I will use it as the basis, if you like, for some of the ideas that are kicking around in the education sector at the moment. So the report suggests that there are is framed around three kind of trends, what they call fast trends. Don't worry, I'll make these more readable in a later slide. Fast trends, mid-range trends, and the fast trends are happening sort of now to the next year and a half, 2 years. The mid-range trends for the next 3 to 5 years, and then the long-range trends, which will happen over 5 years or so. So looking at what they identify, or we, I should say, identified as the fast trends. The first was, digital delivery is increasingly the norm. I don't think you would get anyone disagree with the notion that digital delivery of learning and teaching is something that's going to become increasingly what we do. The second is the growing ubiquity of social media. And the third, and these are probably trends that you have all seen in your own businesses, is the rising preference for personal technology, the BYOD movement, if you like. So I thought the best way to think about these fast trends was to give you examples of what's happening. And because I work at Macquarie and I know what's happening at Macquarie, I'll tell you what's happening at Macquarie. The first trend, the increasingly digital delivery. Well, every unit of study, and we call them units of study, some people might call them subjects or courses, every unit of study at Macquarie has an online presence. So every single one of our units, a student can go and see an online version of it where they'll have details about what they have to do, their assessment tasks. There will probably be a discussion forum. There should be links to the readings. There should be all that sort of stuff that is all about their unit of study. Most of our units of study have their lectures recorded, and those lecture recordings will be available through that online presence. So it's entirely possible to get a large quantity of the content in every one of our units of study via our learning management system, our LMS. And just to give you a sense of the scale, last year we had 1 billion page views of that learning management system. So we're not alone. Most universities are active in this space and doing this type of work. And it's a significant piece of IT infrastructure, a significant piece of development, and a significant investment. We've recently, in the last week actually, released an upgrade to the system which is now using Bootstrap. So it is a responsive web design, and mobile devices are now fully supported. So That was the #1 demand, and this is that third fast trend, the bring your own device. That was our #1 request from students. Why can't I see this stuff properly on my mobile device? So we are now responsive and have gone Bootstrap. At Macquarie, we've kind of resisted the app approach for various reasons. The responsive web approach was a far more appropriate way for us to deal with the requests. As for social media, have to confess we're a little bit slower on that. Of course, we have Facebook presences in our marketing areas. Of course, our students use Facebook and they use it to collaborate and share. We do get mixed messages from our students. Some of them say to us, yeah, bring it on, just bring it here and we'll use it to do our learning. Others say, nah, this is where I hang out with my mates. I don't want my learning to happen there. So it's something we need to think about and balance. We've just done a social media survey with staff about how they want to use social media, and we've had 300 responses to that survey, which is quite good. So we'll parse that data and have a look and work in that space a little bit more. Just another data point for you. Again, that's too small for you to read, but this was our Wi-Fi network at Macquarie we call OneNet, and it's embedded across the campus in all of our lecture theatres and our student spaces, our libraries, food courts, etc., etc. This is a client session report for, what is it, week 21st of April to 28th of April. 30,000 unique clients, 451,000 sessions, which I thought was, decent numbers given our student population, until it was pointed out to me that that particular screenshot came during the mid-semester break. So we actually didn't have a large number of students, comparatively speaking, on campus. They were there, they were still studying, but during a normal semester, and I'm told a normal week in a semester is about double that. So the network, the mobile devices, the online delivery, the bring your own devices is deeply embedded in where our students are. That's where they are, that's where they will be, that's where we are going, and that's where we need to go. So that's the fast trend. We know we have to respond. Hopefully we're responding okay. We want to respond quicker. But very clearly, online, digital, smart devices, we're there. The second area, the mid-range trends, next 3 to 5 years. The report suggests that there will be an evolution of online learning. Like I said, this report sounds like a camel. It's fairly obvious stuff, but there will be an evolution of online learning. Interestingly, it suggests there will be an increasing focus on open content. Now, this is something that's quite challenging to universities, which can be a bit bifurcated. Some of us really embrace the idea of open educational resources. Others are far more conservative and want to really protect their IP. So that's an internal conversation that all universities will need to be having. It's like, well, to what extent do we release our IP, and to what extent do we try and control it? The answer we don't have at the moment. The increased use of hybrid learning designs. Again, thinking back to that example of our library, the hybrid, the blend, the combination of face-to-face online, the combination of analogue and digital, that's something that I think will evolve and be increasingly interesting. So in this evolution of online, I've shown you our kind of online learning management system with the bunch of units that we have online. We are now pushing quite hard, and this isn't 2 to 5 years out for us, this is happening now, around online assessment. So most of our faculties enable the online submission and online marking of assessments. We use, at the moment, we use Turnitin and use their GradeMark product, and so I've just checked an email there, and we've got one faculty who will probably no longer process paper-based assignments as of next semester. So that's moving apace. And our academics will receive the submissions electronically, and they will mark them electronically, hopefully. That's still a challenge. And return them electronically. So that whole shift has already happened. We already have online quizzes in our learning management system, so a lot of the quizzing and that sort of assessment task is already online. And we're exploring how we might move towards online exams. Now, it's always struck me as very strange that my kids, they're, you know, in years 6 and 8, they're all doing stuff on iPads and computers and submitting their assignments electronically. And they're going to be told in a couple of years' time that they have to put down their computers and learn to write again so that they can do their HSC, which to me is absurd. And what's even more absurd is that we keep making them do that at university. So one of the things that I'm pushing very hard to do over the next few years at Macquarie is to move our examinations online. There's some pilots happening in a few institutions around the country where there's some USB boot devices which students plug into their computers to lock them down, and they sit them all in a hall, and then they invigilate as per normal, but they just allow the students to use their devices to submit their exam papers. But there's also this, I don't know if you've seen this, which is an interesting, and by no means am I saying we're using this, but it's an interesting idea around what the online exam might look like. I did cut that short because I don't have all day to show you videos. It is an online proctoring service, and they offer it, and there's institutions in the States that produce it. So that's an interesting model, the idea that you can actually be sitting at home and doing an exam. And I think my law school would beg to differ, but you know, there's some, like I said, there's some cultural changes to confront here. Another example of online evolution, that 4-letter word, MOOC, it sort of pops up whenever people talk about higher education and, you know, talking of apocalyptic titles. It is the avalanche that's going to sweep the whole industry away. It's pretty clear to me that MOOCs aren't really going to destroy us, but we can learn a lot from what MOOCs have done and can show us. And so what we did at Macquarie is we partnered with OUA, and we offered 6 subjects through their Open to Study platform. The first one we did, which was the first university subject they did, is this Becoming Human MOOC. Now the model for this MOOC wasn't the let's offer this once a year and get 100,000 students involved. The model for this MOOC was let's cap it at about 500 and offer it every 4 weeks. So this unit has been running for the last year and a half, and as of the time I took this screenshot, which looks like it happened earlier this month, almost 7,000 students have done it, which is, you know, a decent number of students. We haven't really tracked the impact of that particular subject on our enrolments, for example, but we have got some good data analytics to see what people are doing in that MOOC. We know how often they're watching the videos, we know what quizzes they're doing, and we're getting completion rates in that particular MOOC of about 30%, which you might say, well, that's pretty rubbish, but Coursera gets about 8%. So there's some dimensions here around the MOOC space and what we can learn that are interesting. I won't show you the video. Greg is a fantastic lecturer, but what's interesting is the lessons we've learned from working with academics like Greg is that they are happy to be involved in producing videos. They are keen to engage with online production of these sorts of resources, and we can do it with our on-campus offerings, and it opens up opportunities and it excites them in some ways. So I won't show you that video. The second area was around open access, open educational resources. So this was the other medium, the next medium trend, the idea that universities will make available their research content, their learning and teaching content for free to the world. Sort of the open source of education. And most universities actually do it in their research, so a little hard to read probably on that screen, but we have research online. Awful lot of the research published by the university is available. It's public, you can go and read it. Journal articles, PhD thesis, it's all there. It's something that we do because as an institution, the open access research idea is something that we embrace. Learning teaching space is a little bit more challenging. We make all of our unit guides, so the course guides if you like, available publicly. So if you go to unitguides.mq.edu.au, you can see every single one of our unit guides. You can see what the students will learn, the week-by-week tasks, the assessment, etc., etc. It's all there, it's all public. That took some cultural persuasion on my behalf, because the culture is not to share. But very much my view is, if Harvard can put their coursework online, what have they got that they can share that we haven't got, that we don't want to share? So it's moving in that direction. The next challenge to me is to think about how we make more of our learning and teaching available to more people. So do we want to think about, for example, making our entire learning management system public so that people can actually watch the lectures, engage in the learning activities? That's something we can think about, you know. So that's the part of open educational resources, which is a global movement which actually embraces that philosophy, the idea that when you create an educational resource, you share it with the world, because only by sharing do you actually stand on each other's shoulders and get better and better at what you're doing. So that's a conversation that, in the Megatrends, if you like, in the Horizons report, was something that we're seeing is emerging as a conversation in the next few years. The third kind of medium-term trend was the idea of hybrid design. Now, hybrid design takes many forms. You could argue that flipping the classroom, if you like, of videoing lectures and putting the lectures up on video so that the students watch them online and then having classrooms is a hybrid design. We've tried and explored a number of different things, and you can see how clunky the current incarnations are, and maybe, you know, companies like Optus can help us evolve this. And one of the experiments we tried was a thing called a blended virtual reality classroom. The idea being that there was a real classroom and there was a virtual reality classroom consisting of students not on campus, and we ran it as a single classroom with a teacher addressing the whole space. There's a little bit of a video here which I'll show you, but as you can see, we've got a little way to go here. An interesting experiment. It's something that, you know, tools like Blackboard, Collaborate kind of enable in a different sort of way, but this is trying to do something a bit different, and we'll see where it goes, but an interesting idea around that hybrid design. Another thing that we've done is we have at Macquarie a very big ancient history department, and they're very big on digging things up. And so they have all of these ancient artefacts that come from ancient Egypt, ancient Greece. And the challenge for us was, well, how do we make these really priceless artefacts available to students? And the second challenge is, how do we make them available to students who may not actually be on campus? And so there's a project underway where we're actually 3D scanning those artefacts and then modelling them, and then making them available via a web browser with a bit of a funky interface. It's, you know, nothing amazing, but so you might get this 3D vase which has been scanned and which has been rendered and which has been modelled, and which students can now interact with online. It doesn't require huge bandwidth, amazing kind of computing power. It does, for example, work on an iPad, so it's not like you need, you know, a Cray for this to happen. And that's something that, you know, we think we're leading edge in, and seems to work quite well, and the Ancient History Department is very excited about as a way of ensuring that its artefacts are available in the learning and teaching space. But the really interesting to me part of this, and this photo won't help very much, is that we are now going to 3D print those scans to make facsimiles of those 3D artefacts, and we're going to bury them in a part of the campus, and we're going to invite our students to dig them up. So we've kind of got this kind of interesting loop using technology of enabling our archaeology students to really engage in their discipline in a safe, exciting, interesting way, a really hands-on kind of way of learning that particular discipline. So I can see that time's getting away from me very quickly, but long-range trends, more than 5 years. The report suggests that we will have agile approaches to change, there will be a massive reinvention of the PC, and there will be a rise of data-driven learning and assessment. My personal view is that 5 years ago there was no iPad. Most people thought the cloud was where rain came from. Nokia was the world's biggest phone company and Amazon was a bookstore. So looking ahead 5 years is probably not something that I'm going to spend a lot of energy on. But I'm clear that the sorts of directions that we're exploring in the medium-term ranges are already the sorts of directions that we are happy to keep exploring. What I will say, though, is that everything I've shown you is a remediation. Now, I use the word remediation in a particular way, and the way I use it is a way that a couple of media theorists use it, which was to suggest that new media products tend to replicate old media products in their first incarnations. So when we got radio, we had stage plays on radio. When we had television, the first television shows were kind of like dramas. And it took years, if you like, for television to develop its own vocabulary and its own kind of way of telling stories, so that now we have shows that have their own pacing, their own narratives, their own styles, their own ways of doing things. So television today looks nothing like television of the early 60s. It's totally, totally different. Likewise, what I've just shown you is us using the new technologies to replicate what we used to do. We're redoing lectures, we're redoing tutorials, we're simply doing what we used to do and using the new tools to do it. What I'm more interested in is the reinventions. What can we actually think of in learning and teaching that has nothing to do with how we used to do things, that can be absolutely newly creative and exciting in ways that we perhaps couldn't think of? That particular picture is used an awful lot because it depicts a lecture, I believe, from the University in Bologna in 1350. And you could argue that it doesn't look very different from a lecture theatre in 2014, complete with the sleeping students in the back row. So my, I suppose, challenge around technologies is what can we do next? Where can we go? What ideas can we actually use to build new ways of learning and teaching that don't look backwards but look forwards? And I do have to say I've got 10 slides and 10 ideas for that, but I don't think I've got time to show them. So I might...
It's your call. Do you want to go quickly?
Okay, okay, really quickly. The first idea is new connections. Now, I've got a lovely video here, but what happens in universities is really interesting. We get lots of really talented academics in the same physical space broadly, so 100 acres, but still the same physical space. And guess what? They don't talk to each other. They talk to themselves. But what has happened with the new technologies is it's given us a platform to enable them to talk to each other in a really weird sort of way. So we have a professor by the name of David Christian, who, if you Google him, there's a famous TED talk he's done. He does this stuff called Big History. Bill Gates funds all of his stuff because Bill Gates loves David Christian. David's been on Colbert. He's like, you know, this history superstar. And his idea is that history isn't just about history. History is about everything. And that it should pull together economics and biology and chemistry and everything from the Big Bang to climate change, the whole catastrophe. That was a bad pun, wasn't it? And what we did with David is we said, well, this is great, David. You know what? Let's build a MOOC. You know, let's do something in the MOOC space because I think it'd be fun. And he said, yeah, but you know, nobody ever talks to us. You know, I can't talk to the chemistry department. They don't want to talk to me. So we said, okay, we'll use the MOOC as a way to enable those conversations. And I can't show you the video because it's too long, but we now have 20 professors from across the university collaborating on this MOOC, which will go live in probably about 6 months, in disciplines ranging from chemistry, biology, economics, philosophy, gender studies, right across the gamut, because we pitched this idea of doing something in the new technology space. Now, it's not a technology solution, but it's a connection that's happened because of technology. And it's one that has resulted in a whole range of interesting conversations. So they're talking about, oh, we could really do interesting things with assessment. There's things called threshold concepts and biological testing and blah, 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 stuff I don't understand that could be really exciting. So the connections are interesting. Another thing that we have at Macquarie in terms of connections is we have a program called PACE, which is called Professional Community Engagement, where we have the grand ambition of ensuring that 10,000 undergraduate students a year have some sort of professional engagement opportunity, be that a placement, an internship, or some engagement with community or partners somewhere domestically or overseas. One of the projects we've got is we have students sitting here in North Ryde who collaborate with an NGO in Lebanon doing social media publicity for that NGO using the technology. They've built a connection, a collaboration, they're working on real-world projects, they're using the theoretical skills they've learned at the university to actually construct artefacts for an NGO in Lebanon. And again, it's not a technology solution, but it wouldn't be possible without, you know, in this case, it had to be something like Skype, because the NGO in Lebanon couldn't use, you know, Chromacon or any fancy video conferencing system. It just had to be a simple solution. So international collaborations using those online technologies. We have fantastic ideas around simulations. So learning through, if you like, simulation. So this is an anthropology simulation where you can, you know, suggest that there's a particular kind of impact on the world and things happen. And we can do this now. The word gamification springs to mind, and it's a horrible word, but it does have some value. One of the things we're exploring is a thing called the reading game, which is the use of questions rather than answers. All the research shows that students learn best when they ask questions. So we actually ask them to ask questions, and we gamify it. So they can only get questions answered after they've asked enough questions, and they get stars, etc., etc. And so you build a whole gamified notion of study and learning around those sorts of activities. Approaches around assessment. Some of you may be aware of Bloom's taxonomy, which is kind of a hierarchy, if you like, of the learning that can happen. There's a suggestion from somebody that, you know, how can you use Pinterest to evaluate the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy? What are the different activities you can use in other kinds of social media? Here's another interesting approach. I don't know if you've heard of École 42, new school in Paris, IT school, no teachers, no books, no fees. Warehouse, bunch of iMacs, very hard selection process. Once you're in though, they give you a whole bunch of computing problems. They say, you don't have any resources except that computer in front of you. It's got the internet. We invented that to help you. Go away and solve these problems. Successfully solve the problem, move on to the next problem. And then after you've solved all the problems, you've completed the course. Interesting. We're looking in the app space, for example. I'm interested in not just, you know, your typical university app which tells me, oh, here's the map of the campus and here's where I can find the library. But, well, can we measure stuff? Can we see where students are and what they do? Can we combine that with social networks? Can we put that in with our LMS and the activities? Can the students themselves create their curriculum based on their interests and the inputs from the device? What can we do in that space that's interesting and exciting? And, you know, very clearly, can we move away, and, you know, I don't know what Optus might feel about this, but can we move away from monolithic enterprise solutions? Can we empower our students and staff to build small pieces and join them loosely and come up with learning and teaching approaches that are really exciting and innovative? Because if you look at the way technology is built and developed and innovated, then that's the way it happens. It doesn't happen with people like me sitting in a room and saying, oh, let's spend another $1 million on an LMS. That's not the way the innovation happens. It happens when you empower talented young people to do exciting things. So what could happen if we built and enabled those small pieces and loosely joined them? What I am going to end on is to say that it's not the end of learning, but it's the end of learning. So the reason we're here is to learn, the end of learning. Sorry, I'll let you think about that pun. I might wrap it up there, Elaine.
Yeah, thank you, Sherman. You make me want to go back to university. So listen, we're slightly over, but Sherman, if you could give us a few more minutes, absolutely. I'd love to take some questions from the audience. If you could just say your name and which company you're from, that would be great.
Ross Marr from Creativity Australia. Thanks for that. It was very fascinating. 2 observations, that last 10 slides. I didn't see, it was fast, yeah. I didn't see industry in there anywhere.
No.
Which from my experience, I spent about 15 years sort of in industry and academic collaborations. Yeah, it's a tough call. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done and continue to do. But my question actually is more around brand. And where does a university, where are the conversations around brand happening with the university, given MOOCs and you might put your content online free of charge? Where is the brand conversation at?
I'll answer the first non-question first. Industry is there, it's just not in this deck, so come talk to me later about industry partnerships. The brand stuff is very important. You know, clearly the brand in a global market for higher education providers is something that we need to nurture and develop and grow. But it really has to be an expression of the values of the institution. And the points of differentiation around what we want for our case, a Macquarie graduate to look like. And so it's not as if we create a brand out of nothing. It's very much going back to the research, the learning and teaching and saying, okay, you've spent years at Macquarie, you've completed a degree, what is it about what you've learned that distinguishes you as a Macquarie graduate? And the short answer is yes, we're working on that. Watch this space.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yep, up the front. Eager beavers on the front row today.
There we go. That's why we're sitting on the front, I think. Peter Grant, I'm just connected to a whole bunch of universities and we're doing a review just like this to think about things. So I'd make a comment. Not sure about the library really. It looks a little bit like Blockbuster Video versus Netflix to me, but we could have a chat about that later. My real question is, students these days don't want to just build their degree or their education from one university. So what they want to be able to do is design their own courses basically from all the offerings on the planet. If I was a student and I wanted to do a course in marketing, but I really wanted to work selling things to people in China, there's probably not a university that can give me that exact answer, but multiple ones could. So once you start to go down that path, the issue of accreditation becomes interesting because I'm not getting a degree from one university, I'm doing a whole bunch of courses from a lot of different ones. Where do you think that's going? Because we have the belief that universities won't do accreditation in future, some other organisation that's at a different layer in that ecosystem will.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure I entirely disagree that every student wants to study the way you suggest. I think some do, you're absolutely right. But you know, we've got 38,000 students at Macquarie and very few of them have expressed the desire to study at more than one institution. We facilitate course collaborations and we are actively looking at things like, well, how do you cross-credit programs from other institutions? I suspect we're going to jealously protect our right to accredit. That's not to say there won't be competing bodies that also want to give accreditation, but it's something that we feel that we have, you know, as a sector, a tradition and a history that's worth something. I guess it all comes down to, and the key question which I didn't ask in this presentation, but is one that is front of mind for me is, well, what's a university for? And you could say it's simply to accredit, but there would be many people who beg to differ and who would suggest that there is more to going to university, to being at university, than simply accreditation. Because you're absolutely right. You know, if you just wanted accreditation, there are a million different pathways. There's whole other reasons why institutions like universities exist, and we don't have a week, so we won't go into them.
Thank you. Very fascinating subject. Please join me to thank Professor Sherman Young.
Thank you.